I know. Okay, I just did one Torah portion last week, and I wish I could say it was by design, planned that way, but yeah, I wish I could say that. Actually, it wasn't until afterwards, about a day or two afterwards, I looked and said, and thought, that was a double Torah portion. So, well, just so that we do cover it a little bit, let's go back a couple of pages before we get to the book of Leviticus or Vayikra. And as I was talking to some folks this weekend about this, that there's this thing that we're kind of, it's maybe subconscious, maybe, we don't really realize it, but growing up in a church and going through Bible school like I did, there is this kind of an underlying attitude toward Judaism. It's like anything having to do with Judaism, well, they were wrong in the wilderness. All of these things. Let's point out the golden calf, and let's point out the time with the 10 spies. Let's point out all of that stuff, Korah, and everything that they did wrong. Well, let me tell you, the ending chapters of the book of Shemot or Exodus prove to us that they did some things that were very right. And I would actually go so far as to say that though I disagree with a number of things that happen in Judaism today, which is, that does not make me right, them wrong, or vice versa, but there's a lot that happens today that is absolutely very good. And we see these words in chapter 39, the last words, as Moshe stands probably one of the proudest moments that he had in that time. He did have some difficulties. He had some days that were just slightly challenging. What do you think? Anybody that's been in ministry at all, you understand those challenging days. But he stood there thinking back in his mind to what we would read a few chapters earlier of the day that he said to them, anyone who wholeheartedly wants to give, we're going to receive an offering today. And they did. In the midst of that, yes, is a golden calf. But, somehow those golden calf moments can fade away when you see something as marvelous as the Mishkan, the tabernacle that's standing before you. He must have looked at Aaron's sons of Bezalel, Oliav. I can't pronounce his name well unless I'm looking at it, and then I can't even get it right. He must have looked at these people, the women who had been the weavers, and just the pride that was welling up inside of him, which was an outgrowth of, I think, what was coming from the Father himself. And the words, there it was, they had done it. And Moshe looked out at the people, and he spoke a blessing into their lives for what they had done. Well, we continue on into chapter 40, and some of the words of chapter 40 are some that I've thought about so many times as I've taught on the Mishkan. And it says, finally he erected the courtyard around the tabernacle, the altar, and set up the screen for the entrance to the courtyard. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory, the kavod of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh filled the tabernacle. Moshe was unable to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud remained on it, and the glory, the kavod of Yahweh, filled the tabernacle. What an amazing sight that must have been for Moshe. A man who is not, he's not unfamiliar with the presence of the Almighty. He's been in a burning bush. He's been on top of a mountain. He went without food and water for 40 days because the presence of his Creator was so incredible. But yet, here in this time, he was unable to enter into the tent of meeting because the glory was so great. This takes me back to some of my original encounters with the teaching on the tabernacle. And one of those was from a Messianic teacher of the day. I actually met him a number of years ago, kind of lost track through the years, but Dick Rufin. And Dick Rufin, of course, was part of the Brownsville revival, taught a lot. Much of what I teach on the tabernacle is things that I learned from Dick Rufin. And he always would say, when the pattern is right, the glory will fall. And those are words that have stuck with me through these years. What are we doing today? What is it that we are doing? Why is it that we go back through year after year after year? We go through the Torah. We go through these 5 books. We get to Leviticus, and all of a sudden that thing, that attitude that we used to have of, oh no, Leviticus. And then all of a sudden we remember the wonderful things that we learned in the last year through this book of Vayikra. And in the midst of that, the question or the statement is coming to life. When the pattern is right, the glory will fall. And so part of our reason for going into Vayikra is to get our pattern right. Now let's get into this. Now the translation here is the naming of this book is actually not even from the translation. Leviticus goes back to Latin, and I kind of think it's pretty absurd to believe that even the Gospels would be written in Latin. That here's Yeshua up on the Galilee, and he's speaking to the disciples in Latin or Greek. That to me just, I know there's people out there that, and it, I guess at one time made sense to me in a very strange way. But to take it another level, to think that, that Vayikra, when it was written, that there was any kind of a Latin influence in this book, I don't quite think so. So the word Leviticus, though, it's a translation from Latin of the priest's law. Now, of course, if it's the priest's law and we're not priests, then why in the world would we want to look at this book? Because it doesn't have anything to do with us. Well, when we look at it from the standpoint of he called, which is the translation of Vayikra, that it's the meaning of this becomes so amazing for us. So let's get into this. He called. The root word here for this word that we get ikra from is, if we go to the root word, it is about an encounter. So let's go into Vayikra this year with an attitude of we're desiring to encounter him. We're desiring to hear from him, be called into his presence, and in doing so, we're going to encounter him. Now, the word is, Hebrew is Quph, Resh, and Aleph. Quph, Resh, and Aleph is the Quph is the sun on the horizon. So if you were to look at the letter in its original form, it would be like a sunrise. You would see and you can go online and get pictures of all these. It would be like a horizon and then a sun beginning to be, if you've ever been at the ocean, looking toward the east, and the sun rising, you just start to see little parts, a little bit of you start to see light, and then there's the top part. As you continue to watch, it comes, it's brighter and brighter. At first, you can actually see with, without any damage, you can actually look and you can start to see the outline of the sun coming up. Eventually, it will become so bright that you cannot look at it. And this should be kind of a message to us of what is happening with our life as our pattern, as we're desiring to put our pattern into His pattern, is that we begin to see the light. And then the second letter is the resh, which is the head, of course, the head of the house. And the last letter is the aleph, or the mark of the covenant. And so this is the sun rising, the brighter and brighter revelation of the head of the mark of the covenant. Or we could say it like this: this is the revelation of the Messiah. So the book of Vayikra is to be a revelation of the Messiah. Interesting enough, and I was kind of playing with this morning a little bit. I guess playing with it is not the best term, but I was just looking through it, and the word that we get Vayikra is again Quph, Resh, and Aleph. Now, if we were to go to Resh, Aleph, Hey, so using two of those letters, but then adding a Hey at the end, what would that word be? It's the word Ray, or he saw, or he perceived. It's the same word that is used for Abraham when he was, after the offering of Isaac on Mount Moriah, when it says he saw, he perceived into something. And so this is, at least in my mind, is related because it is a Resh, Aleph, and a Hey, which is the head, the mark, and the breath. So Vayikra is about us as we encounter Him. We begin to perceive the breath that came from Him, which is the next word that He spoke. He spoke from the tent of meeting. The word there is Devar. In the beginning was the Devar, and the Devar was with Elohim, and the Devar was Elohim, and we beheld His glory. That word we'll go on and say, and this is the message I did this month of, and He tabernacled among us. All of it connected. See, this disconnect that I've talked about so many times, that we, putting this has got this little compartment over there, and this one, and it's like we have a post office box. And so either Kathy or myself, we go, we get the key, and you open the post office box, and you take out what is yours. You don't grab somebody else's key and look into their post office box. That's called a felony. But that's our perception on this side of the post office box. Kathy, years ago, actually worked in the post office down in Wakulla County. So she was able to go around, and she was the one that was putting the mail in the other side. If you look at it from that side, what's the different perception? Is that it's all of these things and all these boxes, each one of them having its own message to someone. What if in our perception we were able to look at that box as one? That it wasn't just the little pigeonholes anymore, that it was one revelation. So instead of us walking up and just getting that little bit of mail out of that little bit of post office box that we have, what if we were able to receive all the information that is there? So that's what happens when we come together as a community. All right, think about this, that I look in the Torah and I get my post office box. I get the revelation here of the, the commonality between the word Vayikra and the word Ray. And so I bring that, but you look at it and you see something else, so you bring that, and someone else sees something else, so they bring that. And what do we have? In the end, we have this complete revelation because each one of us brought what was in our box. But when we go to the other place and say, the whole revelation is just what's in my box, there's a crazy term that has been used through the years that you're putting God in a box. Do you know that's absolutely impossible? That you don't put him in a box. What you do is you get in a box, and you have like a little opening in the box, and you can see out, and so you think that what you're seeing is everything there is. He's not in a box. You put yourself in a box. But if we're only allowed to get that little glimpse, then what do I need? I need to get boxes from everybody else so I can get a greater revelation. I hope that in some way makes sense. Anybody that goes to your post office box next time, maybe you'll look at it a little bit different. So the word is that he spoke to them from the tent of meeting, that he devar. So the same word that came forth in the beginning of his word, let there be light, and there was light, and he saw the light, or ha'et or, the light, the Aleph Tav light, Gematria 613. So he was speaking, his word was his Torah coming forth, the commandments of his Torah. He spoke that, and he was speaking it from the tent of meeting, which is the tent of Moed. Okay, let's kind of start putting some of this together. That the Hebrews were to, as they heard his voice, heard his devar, heard his word, he was using his word to call them into a place of encounter at an appointed place, the Moed, the tent of meeting. Okay, let's take it to another place. In just a few days, for many of us, we will be observing, well, let's not observe, let's enter into. We will be entering into the time of Pesach, or Passover. Statement. There are numerous people today that go by the Hillel calendar. I'm one of them. There are those that will be going by the Aviv, the Aviv barley that is seen in Israel. There will be those that are going to go by the spring equinox because of the words of Genesis chapter 1, I believe, verse 4, that don't quote me on the verse, I'm not going to go back there, you can look at it. The sun and the moon and that which is in the heavens is for signs and seasons, and so the calendar cannot begin until after the spring equinox. You can get a pretty good argument for all three. I think that there's a better argument for one of the three. You'd love for me to tell you which one, right? Well, guess what? I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to tell you is that, and this may not be a clue into which I believe is the better argument or not. Yeah, here we go. We're going to be doing, in our home, myself, Kathy, a number of people, will be coming together next Shabbat. I think it's the 27th of March. And we will be, God willing, entering into the time of Passover. Do I believe that I have the right date? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe not necessarily. My reasoning this year in doing Passover on the evening of the 14th into the 15th, which will be the 27th, between the evenings, the evening of the 27th, is for a place of unity with my brothers and sisters of Judah, of the southern kingdom. Again, do I believe completely, right or wrong? That's not the issue for me this year. And maybe that's a difficult thing for some folks to consider. But that's what I'm doing. There are people, very close friends of mine, in fact, that are doing another date. Other times, they're going off the sighting of the moon, which will be a day later, going off of different interpretations of the dates that are given to us in Leviticus chapter 23. I fully respect what someone else is doing and will continue to respect as long as respect is given back. It's not about me being right or someone else being right. It's a place of accepting that the Father could have. And we're going to go through Vayikra, and he could have said things like going back to Bereshit, Genesis, Exodus, when he said, "This shall be the beginning of months to you." He could have explained that a little bit better, don't you think? So there would not be this so-called confusion in our day. But he didn't. And is there a reason behind that? I believe so. That in the end, we would each seek out our relationship with him, our relationship with each other. And there would be given opportunities that we can either use as opportunities for division or opportunities for unity. Now, with that being said, I cannot come into unity with Good Friday and Easter. There are some that would say that that Easter has nothing to do with Ishtar. I can't. That's such an easy thing to find. The pagan root. And I'm not saying that if a person is celebrating Easter or Resurrection Sunday or what, I'm not calling them a pagan. I'm just saying there is a root to this day that is of paganism, and I refuse to come into agreement with that. However, if you're going to be keeping Passover, how you do it is between you and him. I know that this Passover, I have friends of ours that will be here for this day, and they were with me and Kathy, the first Passover that we ever had, that we ever were a part of. And I look back at how what the revelation has been through the years and where I am today versus where I was then. It's like being on two different planets, folks. And so I need to accept other people in their revelation. And others need to accept me in mine. So whatever you're doing, however you're doing Passover, it basically comes down to this. Shoes on your feet, staff in your hand, and eat it in haste, because the Passover is about going somewhere. It's not as much about where we've been, it's about where we're going. And so if you can come into agreement with this, of Passover is about us going somewhere, then we're on the same page, even if we're on different dates. Okay, now let me move on. So it's this, the Moed, okay, the tent of meeting, the Moed. So as we come into the time of Pesach, it is an invitation. It is his invitation to encounter his word in a time, in a place. It is an opportunity for us to encounter his realm in our realm. He's speaking to us, it says here, from a tent, which is, I believe, very similar to what he says in the book of John, in the first chapter. Is he's spoke to Moshe from a tent, and he's still today speaking to us from a tent. I was just reading in the book of Mark this morning. What was he doing in that day 2,000 years ago? His devar was coming from a tent. His devar is still coming from a tent. Okay, we gotta move on with that. Now, I'm not going to get, it's only one Torah portion, but to think that I'm going to get into all the details, probably not. The word of Vayikra, it's about a set apart walk, okay? And it's a vav, and then the letters here of it's a Quph. The Quph is the letter which is attributed to holiness or being set apart. In the days of Scripture, in the temple, if something had a Quph on it, it was a mark of holiness. It would be kind of like, you mail a package, you put fragile, handle with care, because there's something in here that's not of the norm, something that should be handled in a different manner than the common things. And so this letter of the Quph was placed upon something to show you that what was here, what it is set apart for a specific purpose. Vayikra is the set apart walk for those who have been redeemed. Okay? It's about redemption and holiness. The word holy kind of is a watered down version, or maybe not a watered down version, but it's one of those blue sky kind of words, kind of up in the clouds of what is it? Okay, I was talking to some folks this week about what is the word. The word grace is like that, And someone said, well, it's unmerited favor. Okay, well, what is that? Well, it's grace. It's mercy. Well, to use Brad Scott's teaching that affected me so much. So thankful for Brad and the life that he shared. The word faith, the word mercy or grace, is an invitation into a tent. That's what it actually, in the paleo format, this is what it speaks to us. It's an invitation, and the word faith or trust is to act upon that invitation. So someone invites you to their house for Passover, they've offered you grace. And when you accept it and you go to their house, you enter into their door through the threshold, what are you doing? You're acting out the word faith. So a concrete meaning here. The word holy is kind of one of those words to me, in that it's a I can't quite grasp the nature of the word, but when I understand that the word kadosh means to be set apart. In my days in the Nazarene church, there was a doctrine there of the second work of grace, which was to be set apart or sanctified, as one of those words, sanctification, okay? And though I today would see that whole thing a little different than what I was taught back then, there is a truth in the word of sanctification. Now, here's where it gets a little fuzzy. How do we define the word sanctified, sanctification, or to be set apart? Well, if you go to 46,300 and something at the latest count I had, which was a few years ago, denominations, each one of them has their book of what it means to be holy. Well, I'd have to say that today, considering that all the upheaval in so many different denominations that are accepting anything that comes along, they don't have a clue what the word set apart means, and how can they? How can you know what the word kadosh, set apart, means if you don't have a revelation that comes from the one who defined the word? So if the Torah is done away with, specifically that Book of Leviticus, that has nothing to do with us, right? That's what many of us once thought. So if that's done away with, then how can we know what the word set apart means? Well, here's an idea. We come up with our own definition. Yeah, how's that work? It works out real good, as long as you have enough people that will agree on the definition, and that makes it right. Wrong. Just because the majority agrees on something doesn't make it truth. It just means that the majority agreed on it, and the majority can agree on something that is wrong or a lie, and that doesn't make it truth. That still means it's wrong. It's still a lie. We have to go back to the one who gives us the definition. And so the definition of to be set apart is where? It's in the book of Leviticus. I tried to put Leviticus and Vayikra together into one word. That didn't work out real well. Here's a statement for you for this book. It is a book that teaches us how to be set apart. And in this book, we will see that which should be considered food and that which should be considered nothing, not food. Okay? I was talking with someone talking about pigs. Pigs are set apart. Yeah, they're sanctified. They're set apart, not as food. They're set apart as cleaners. Okay, shrimp, or known now as cockroaches of the sea. It's set apart for a reason, to clean, not as food. We'll get there a little bit later on. But we will see what is set apart as far as the Moedim, the festivals that we're going to be entering into. He sets apart times. Kathy and I are going to be coming up pretty soon on a 40th anniversary. Yeah, somebody putting up with me for 40 years. That took some anointing. It's the time it's set apart. And, you know, I could probably, I don't know, I'd go to her and say, you know, I'm just really tired of, you know, this anniversary being in April. I think we should make it in, like, you know, I think June 1st would be fine. Or what about changing your spouse's birthday or your children's birthday? Or, you know, it'd be like ridiculous, right? Well, why do people want to do that with His Word? Why do people want to do that? Well, I know what it says, that we should be, you know, we should be observing Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and we should be and first fruits. I know what it says, but really, why do we have to do it that way? We can come up with our own ways and call it set apart. No. Let's go back to His ways of doing things. And it all comes down to an attitude. Yeah. Leviticus, Vayikra, it reveals our attitude toward Him. In the first Torah portion here of Vayikra, we're going to go through, and I'm not actually going to do this, I'm going to give a commercial for someone. We're going to go through the different offerings. We have the Korban offering, we have the Shalomim offering, the different offerings that are here. I'm not going to, I don't have the time really, but, and I have to be very blunt with you. It's not an area really of my expertise. I can teach on them, but I don't believe I can do it real well. So, commercial message. Barry Phillips. Everybody that listens to me knows Barry Phillips. If you don't, you haven't been listening very well. Barry has a 10-minute Torah that he does on YouTube, and I think I'm not sure if you posted it anymore on Facebook or not, but it's on YouTube. And you can go to Barry Phillips, Remnant of Israel, Israel with a Y. You can go to his website, remnantofisrael.com, and you can see the link to his YouTube. You can subscribe there. And so this week, I know Barry will be teaching through these offerings. In my opinion, he has one of the best. It goes into the very, how do I say this? Very hands-on practical way. How's that for politically correct? Hands-on practical way of looking at the offerings. And so I challenge you, it's the 10-minute Torahs are about 10 to 11 minutes, which is a lot shorter than Eddie Chumney's 5-minute update, which lasts about 50. I haven't caught up with Eddie for a while to know if he's still doing that, but inside joke there. He does 5 of them a week, and he's going to be dealing with this, I'm sure. So that's commercial for Barry. But let's go to the some of the first words here in verse 4. It says, let's go back to 3. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he must offer a male without defect. Okay, first of all, our offerings that we bring are to be without defect. This is, though my grandmother, I doubt she ever put this together, but this is, some of you have heard me tell the story of how I'd go to the bank with Granny, and she's right here over at this shoulder. I actually got that right. How did I do that? Usually I can't, looking at the screen backwards. But I'd go with Granny to Barnett Bank on Edgewood Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida, in her old Plymouth, and probably without a seatbelt on. I guarantee you, without a seatbelt on. And we'd go to the bank, and Granny'd have to cash her Social Security check. so she'd pay the light bill and different things. And so she would ask, I'd go in, come on, of course I'm going to go in, because in that day they gave you suckers. So I'd go into the bank, and I remember Granny would always go up to the teller, and she'd deposit a certain amount of it, and she'd cash a certain amount, and then she'd have a certain amount that she would say, now give me this amount in uncirculated bills. And that would be what her tithe would be. So on Sunday morning, as the plate was passed at Avondale Baptist Church in Jacksonville, Florida, and on that right-hand side of the church, about 3 rows back, Granny be putting her offering in, and it would be with bills that had no defect. I'm sure she never put that together, but I'd have. And it taught me a great lesson, and should teach us all a great lesson of how when we bring something to Him, it should be without defect. The different offerings, they're all about us bringing a part of ourselves to Him. And this is the next verse, that He is to bring an entrance to the tent of meeting so that it can be accepted by Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He is to lay His hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on His behalf to make atonement for him. Now, I'm not going to go into the aspects right now of the atonement offering, but rather the method of bringing the offering is that the word says that the person was to lay his hands upon the animal. Now, we get this idea that the animal was brought to the gate of the tabernacle, later on the gate of the temple, and it was like, it's kind of like when we drop off our dog Kaya at the dog park. We put a leash on her, she gets out of the car, and we walk over to the fence, and she runs in, you take the leash off, and it's like, hey, go do your job here. We'll be back a little later to pick you up. That's not the attitude we're to have with the offering. That was not how it was done in that day. Is that you went and you brought your offering, and the priest was there, and this is the aspect of the priesthood that I think is so important for us to understand today. The priest was not there to do the service unto Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for you, but was to assist you in the right manner of the offering. It's kind of like when we go over to the words of Shaul and the fivefold ministry, so-called fivefold ministry, that was the apostle, the prophet, the evangelist, the pastor, and the teacher. It says these are given not to do the work of the ministry, which is to go forth with the gospel of the kingdom, but these were given to assist the Tzaddikim, the saints, in the work of going forth. The Levitical priesthood, this is not a different thing. This is not something that Shaul came up with. But he is just explaining what the work of the priesthood was to begin with. It was to be to assist you. And so, part of my job on a weekly basis, the reason that I do this, and the reason that, that Barry and I record together, and Hanok and I record together, and I go out and travel when I can, and all of these things, the reason is to assist you in the proper ministry of the gospel of the kingdom, which begins with our own lives. See, you can't give away something you don't have. So if I don't have a properly set apart, I didn't say perfect, but properly set apart life, then how can I give that to you? And if you don't, how can you give that to others? Because that which begins in corruption will end in corruption. The priest was to minister the right way of a set-apart life, beginning with the instructions of how to bring the first offering. And it says that he was to lay his hand, the person was to lay his hand, and the wording here is to lean into. He was to lean into the offering, lean into the animal. In a way, it was like he was pushing himself into that animal. That animal was was not a substitute, but was a representation of his life, a representation of what he was bringing. So whether it was a sin offering for things that were done consciously, that he afterwards said, why did I do that? And so what did he brought himself to the altar. Something that was inadvertent, or, I know something's wrong here. I know there's something I can't figure it out. I think we've probably all been there. I can't figure it. I just know there's something wrong in my relationship. So I'm going to bring something. I'm going to bring a part of myself, and I'm going to lay myself into it. Let's go to, in just 1 minute, let's go to offerings. And by the way, we've had new people that have come on board lately. Thank you so much. But when you go on to PayPal, or you write that check, or you send it via dog sled, or whatever you do, don't just sit down and write something out and throw it in an envelope and put it in the mail. I mean, go ahead and do that, yeah. But what I want to do is, how about putting yourself into it? As you're clicking the PayPal button, or the charge, or whatever you're calling it, put yourself into it. It's not just something you do like writing out a check, or I know that's old-fashioned, but it's not like going online and bill pay and I'm going to send this much to the electric company and this much to the charge card company and this much to this, and no, this part of what you're doing. That's why it's the first part. So the first thing that we do should be our tithe. Everything else is like, okay, I just got to do this, because that's all just out of, I got to do it. But the first part, we should put ourselves into it. Stop and take a moment and consider what we're doing. All right, got to go. Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Yeah. Bezrat Hashem, God willing, I'll be able to say that again next week. And until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.